Capital Record, where we defend free enterprise and capital markets because we believe in the dignity of the human person. Well, hello and welcome to David Bahnsen's Capital Record, brought to you by National Review. As this is dropping, this podcast, it is the day before the day in which the big announcements are supposed to be coming about President Trump's plan for tariffs. Now, because this podcast is dropping on April 1st, perhaps I could go with an April Fool's Day message and tell everyone how I've given up on free trade and decided that you can tax your way to prosperity. But no, I'm still this dinosaur in the political and economic right that called a free trader. And I'm not a dinosaur in the sense that I'm literally, there's none of us left. Because Senator Pat Toomey, who I appeared with at the National Review Ideas Summit a couple weeks ago in Washington, D.C., he's still holding the line. Steve Forbes, who's one of the great free traders and flat tax advocates of the last 25, 30 years, he's still holding the line. The great economic historian and frequent Capital Record guest, Amity Shlaes, also was on that panel with myself and Senator Toomey in D.C. a couple weeks ago. She's still holding the line. But there is a significant amount of people that would say they basically agree with the tenets of David Bahnsen's Capital Record on most issues. They advocate for free enterprise. They align themselves with principles of free markets. But they would say, you know, when it comes to this tariff thing, it's really necessary that we tax imports higher as a means of either getting something to be more fair, or as a means of stimulating or promoting or redirecting or protecting the domestic manufacturing sector. And I've done a lot on the problem with this discussion in the past. I did a podcast earlier in the year where I made the case that I still hold on to very strongly, that it's a very frustrating topic to cover because of the inconsistency and the incoherence around what the actual argument is. Are we talking about fairness, or are we talking about fentanyl, or are we talking about human rights, or are we talking about flat out protectionism? And then, you know, the area that probably bothers me the most is when we talk about just the trade deficit in and of itself as supposedly something impairing quality of life for Americans, which I promise you would be news to many countries that do have a trade surplus, that we are supposed to be envying their quality of life and that they are supposed to be thumbing their nose at our standard of living. The fact of the matter is that the frustration I have around what the message is not caused by me. It is caused by those that have jumped on the tariff bandwagon and seen fit to move the ball quite a bit as far as what it is they're actually arguing for. So right now, I'm not going to relitigate my broader points that I often make, that it is a sign of a rich country generally to run a trade surplus, a trade deficit, that you being in a position to give other countries your green pieces of paper and them giving you goods that your citizens want to have. You're in a position to do so because you have more money than they do. You're also often in a position where you're benefiting from the comparative advantages that we are never, ever, ever going to get lumber and copper in our country as cheap as we can get it from other countries, and that not harnessing those competitive advantages is stupid. It's stupid economics. But then there are certainly areas when people love, and they have rhetorical and political benefits to these little cheap shot lines about, oh, we got cheaper toasters, or there's cheaper toys at Walmart, and yet we deindustrialized America. We didn't deindustrialize America. We are manufacturing as much as we ever have. We are doing so with less people, and that is a technology story, not a trade story. To the extent there's an awful lot about trade that we import in America, people could say I don't like it, and it has no doubt cost some American workers jobs. Undoing it would no doubt cost some Americans jobs. So when we look into the morality of markets here, we're not talking about we would morally fortify American workforce by finding some policy in the toolbox, and in this case, that policy being tariffs. We're talking about trade-offs and what other American workers and American consumers, American economic activity, we would hurt. And all of this being done under the philosophical tenet that the government, particularly the federal government, by the way, devoid of Congress, okay, utilizing Section 232 and other emergency measures under the guise, the total disingenuous guise of national security concerns to claim that auto parts that are being made in Mexico and then come across the border to get finished in South Carolina or Texas or Louisiana, and somehow that's a national security concern. So much like the Nippon Steel, US Steel debate, we've just completely bastardized the issue of national security as a disingenuous, pretextual basis for doing economic intervention. And it drives me bonkers. But right now, my focus, as you're listening to Capitol Record, is what is allegedly going to be happening tomorrow, April 2nd. There are two schools of thought I'm running into. One is that the administration lost the plot, and there's a lot of the supply siders and generally anti-tariff, free trade, traditionalist, Reaganite conservative, Milton Friedman types are worried that the administration's lost focus on traditional supply side priorities, tax reform, making permanent the prior Trump tax cuts, deregulation, and energy independence. I don't believe that they've lost the plot on that, but I understand why many do, and that they have certainly had challenges in messaging, and there are a number of questions about who's on first within the administration, from commerce to Treasury, NEC fitting in there as well. But I'm hopeful that there is still a very substantial priority on the larger economic priority, which is deregulation and, of course, removing the impediments that excessive taxation represent. That is a question that is largely political as to how it will play out. If those that are concerned that they have deprioritized those things are right, then that will play out and it will not be good, in my opinion, for the economy, in particular in 2025. Then there are others who say we are absolutely facing a permanent reordering of international trade, and the president is hell-bent on getting the trade deficit gone, and this is where this is going. And April 2nd, they're going to announce a lot of draconian measures. I think they may very well announce draconian measures April 2nd. I don't know what they will be. I think that there will be, within 5 seconds of any announcement, the 6th second will be the first exception, and the 10th second will be the second exception, and it will likely not be as universal as had been feared, and it will lend itself to a heavy amount of presidential discretion. That may end up being good for markets. It will most definitely be bad in terms of economic clarity and in terms of trying to fortify certainty that can enable economic decision making. So I think it will hurt capital goods investment and the productivity enhancing decisions. But this is my kind of concluding takeaway here for Capitol Record. I don't know that whatever they announce is going to be the final word, because there has been no indication at all that they have a vision for a final word. Allegedly, Secretary Lutnick at Commerce is driving a lot of this policy portfolio. The president came out last week and said he might give China lower tariffs if they let us buy TikTok. These are all the types of things one says when everything's in flux. And so my own view of what it means to markets is that there is not clarity. Therefore, the economic outlook is unclear. I'm far more concerned about how it impacts production decisions than I am consumption decisions. But fundamentally, what is versus what ought to be are two different things, and I have strong opinions on both. In the category of what is, the answer is we do not know, and we're likely not going to know, because the administration has adopted a certain degree of chaos as part of their conscientious plan and strategy. In terms of what ought to be, We ought to have freer and more trade, because trade only happens when it is deemed to be by the people in the trade in their best interest. Therefore, trade creates wealth, and impairing trade destroys wealth. This is not an economic principle that the other side is going to win the debate on. They could win the debate by stating we need to impair trade and thereby wealth creation for another good, and another common good, another greater good, another important good, another priority. I don't think they'll win that argument either. But that's at least a different argument than saying, no, you will actually benefit the economy. You will get rich by taxation. That, my friends, is an argument the left has used and been wrong about for 100 years. The right will be wrong on this for 100 minutes, 100 days, 100 years, however long they hold on to it. But there is a remnant holding fast to the idea that free exchange and mutual cooperation are how we develop, as the great Adam Smith said in his anti-mercantilist creed, the wealth of nations. Thank you for listening to David Bahnsen's Capital Record.